Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, a member of the National Association of Realtors. Here we are once again, shining the light of knowledge on the path to being a real estate rebel. All for you. It's been an interesting day since last we talked. We're going to talk about a subject I'm actually kind of keen on, rent to buy, or rent to own, I guess is what a lot of folks call it. And there's two ways to do it. There's a company offering a service to facilitate it. To my mind, though, it's a way for a company to interject itself into a transaction that should absolutely just be negotiated between a seller and a buyer, because the bottom line is this company puts itself kind of in the middle of things, and then it obviously reaps the rewards, where I think for a lot of sellers, if they put this together correctly, this can absolutely be a huge benefit for both buyers and sellers. So we'll talk about that in a minute. We're going to do the usual thing and maybe have a little ground truth chat about some interesting stuff I've been wrestling with over the last day, plus also talk about a few other interesting news items that have come across. I guess I'll start with the personal experience thing. I've never made any secret of the fact that the only thing wrong with the real estate business is all the real estate agents. There are just too darn many of them, and for whatever reason, there are an awful lot of them that aren't real good at being real estate agents. The training that they get really doesn't do much in terms of teaching them the skills to become a good real estate agent. A lot of folks just don't have the temperament to be a good real estate agent. They're always, bad agents I think tend to be made rather than born. But the training really focuses them on all these things that have nothing to do with doing good work for their clients. And I happen to be involved in a couple of transactions right now, and in one of them, I had so my folks are buying a property, and the agent from the other side got my folks to the point where they didn't want to. They literally told me they feel that they do not want to get involved in a transaction where they are helping that person get paid. That's how much my folks don't like this agent. And I have to say that it's a little bit unnerving, because the bottom line is this person is absolutely not representing the best interest of their client. When you negotiate a deal, really the sole responsibility of each agent in it should be to facilitate each party reaching their goal, right? We've negotiated the details. From there on, it should just be working together to make it happen. And that's been problematic. Escrow hasn't closed yet, and I'm a little bit, I guess you could say I'm a little bit paranoid, I guess you could say, when it comes to things relating to. So I don't want to say too much, give too many details, just because I think, if anything, it's bad luck or just bad taste or whatever you want to call it. But the thing that really got me ultimately was, now when I go into a transaction as a real estate person, I do a little research on the agent on the other side. I like to see how long they've been an agent. I like to see, not necessarily because it's going to tell me whether they're good or bad. I have met folks who have been agents for a super long time, who've done tons of deals, who really suck at being agents. And I've met some that are relatively new. They're fantastic. But I do look up their info to see how many deals have they closed in the last few months, or if I can figure that out. How long ago were they licensed? That sort of stuff. And during this process, there were some actions taken by the other party's agent that didn't make sense. They didn't really fall in line with the contract. They didn't fall in line with the agreement, both the formal written part and the stuff that we were in the process of negotiating before we formalized it in a document. And it was just kind of weird, particularly because this person went out of their way to forcefully express the fact that they know what they're doing. They've been doing this a long time. And what they didn't know was that I had already looked up their history and knew that they had been an agent for less than 5 months and that this was their first transaction at all. They'd had no sales, no listings, no nothing except for the transaction that we're in. So this is their very first transaction, and there was this huge vitriolic pushback on different things that we were working on in the transaction that were just really out of place. They didn't make sense. We're barely 2 weeks into this, and it was crazy that this kind of stuff was going on. But anyway, it was one of those moments where I realized anytime I ever feel like I need to take a break from real estate, it never has anything to do with buyers, sellers, investors, real estate entrepreneurs, or any of those folks. It's always real estate agents that push me over the edge. And in this case, I obviously can't go to that person's client and say, hey, you really need to have a chat with your agent because they are creating a process here that makes people hate her and make them not want to go through with this transaction, not because they don't want the house, but because they don't want to be working with this person. And of course, you can't do that. And what's funny is my folks really were relatively insulated from, I guess you could call it, the shenanigans of this agent. But it was unfortunate because they had gotten copied on an email that I probably would have re-expressed to my clients in less vitriolic fashion, so that I could keep the calmness at an acceptable level. But in any event, where I'm going with this is you really need to, it's just like it's all the work you do at the front end of any process, right? If you want to rent your house, the thing you need to do is spend time really filtering your tenants, your applicants to rent, and make sure you're doing your homework on them. When you're trying to get a loan, you really need to talk to multiple lenders and do as much as you can to ascertain how capable these folks are. And the same thing with your real estate agent. You need to ask them some tough questions. And I'm not going to tell you to, out of hat, just dismiss someone who's only been in the business for 6 months and you're their first transaction. I know some folks who've been in that, and I know when I was in that place 27 years ago. I was licensed in October of '88. And I remember that first year. And I wanted to give my undivided attention and really make really do well. But it seems to me that the temperament of this person really could have maybe been explored a little bit with some challenging questions during the selection process, or maybe this is a relative of the seller. I don't know. But in any event, I wanted to share that with you. It was just because it's been a long time since I've actually had an agent that I've encountered that had me wanting to take a break. And actually, I've actually been surprised because there's an awful lot of them out there that aren't that great. But it's been a while since I've had one that actually hurts a transaction more than helps it through their participation. So it was interesting. So now I'm working more exclusively with the coordinator for her rather than her, and it's working out better now. But anyway, I wanted to share that because I guess I want to throw up the red flag, shoot the flare, and remind everyone to really take that selection process seriously when you're evaluating who's going to represent you in this process, and having a normal interaction with them. You can kind of get a feel for what their personality is like, and see if you think that's the kind of person who's going to be able to get things effectively done the way you would like them to be done, or really just sufficiently represent your needs. But okay, so my whining session is over. I apologize. I've been trying to use an opportunity to vent a little bit, but also to hopefully just remind you of something that's very important for the process. All right, so I wanted to hit a couple other interesting headlines. According to the Miami New Times, the feds will track how much of Miami's real estate boom is being fueled by money laundering. The federal government is going to be insisting on identifying these anonymous buyers of high-end properties, and while it's happening in some specific locations, New York City, Miami, it's really going to be aimed at the luxury market in general. There's going to be rules that require identity of limited liability company owners. Apparently, and this is absolutely true, and I'll be honest, a huge chunk of my business is not luxury. I probably, I mean, for the first 6 years of my real estate career, probably 80% of it tended to be more luxury just because that's where I was. I was over in the Palo Alto, Los Altos Hills area. And then things kind of went mainstream for a while. And over the last 5 or 6 years, probably, I don't know, 20% has been luxury homes, or at least homes that would be categorized in the luxury price range. And I find frequently that the buyer who is the individual, the entity doing the buying, is in fact a business entity. I get to meet the person, I get to physically meet the real person. But apparently, in a lot of these transactions, what's happening is the buyers, the sellers, everybody involved, none of them are actually meeting the real human being behind all this stuff. It's just their representatives. But according to this, there's a really big percentage of Manhattan high-end towers purchases are being made by limited liability corporations. The Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network said Wednesday, quote, that it will seek out the identity of individuals behind limited liability companies that pay cash for high-end residential real estate in Manhattan and Miami-Dade County. Starting in March, title insurers will be required to name the true beneficial owner behind the anonymous entities. FinCEN said this in a statement. However, my feeling is that this is something that's going to go national. I can't imagine that this would be something that would just be implemented in those two areas. I think it absolutely would go into that, because the bottom line is this allows laundering of all kinds of types, whether you want to do it for drug kingpins or terrorist organizations, whatever. That's a great way to launder money. You buy the property, and then some point down the road you sell it. Quoting to this, demand for Manhattan's most expensive homes is slipping while apartments from a high-end construction boom aimed at wealthy investors pile up on the market. Resale prices for the top 20% of the market peaked in February and have fallen every month since then, according to an analysis through October by listing website StreetEasy. Kind of interesting, and it's also interesting because the way they're phrasing this is a huge deal, and apparently it's enough of a percentage of these LLCs where no one knows who the actual beneficiary is are being purchased this way. And the concern is that segment of the market, of the purchasing market, will just simply disappear like that. It'll just poof. If that's true, and the fact that anonymity played such a huge part, you have to wonder how much shenanigans really was going on in the luxury market, at least in New York City and Miami, and who knows where else. So interesting to keep an eye on. Not something most of my listeners are going to have to worry about. I know I've got some high-end folks out there that probably don't need to worry about this because I know who you are because you contact me. You're not one of these folks who's looking to launder money. But for folks who buy at that end, we may see this having an effect on luxury real estate in terms of bringing down the prices. I mean, if it's what it sounds like from this description, a pretty good chunk of these LLC purchases are going to dry up. Well, what happens then to the homes that they would have purchased? Do they languish on the market? Is the luxury market robust enough that slack gets taken off relatively easily? I don't think so. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there in those particular luxury markets. And one consistent thing that we've talked about on this show, going back at least a year and a half, is the crazy increases in high-end properties in New York. It's been a spectacular increase, and what's interesting is so much of that has not translated to other areas where if it was a general uptick in luxury homes, you would think it would be more common. While that was happening in New York, we were talking about luxury properties here, not in the crazy zones of Palo Alto and Los Altos Hills and all these other areas where luxury homes seem to sell pretty quickly. But luxury homes in my neck of the woods, down in, say, San Martin, where the softest market, the markets that were still seeing the biggest discounts, were luxury markets. So less mainstream in terms of what's going on with this influence, and far more the most popular urban centers, or the destination points like New York and Miami. And I would guess another place that would be on their go-to list, I would imagine it's San Francisco, because I know this is a phenomenon that occurs in San Francisco for the more luxury-focused properties as well. Next, Zillow mortgage rates lower now than before the Fed rate hike. So this is kind of a cool one. Mortgage rates are now lower than what they were just before the Fed raised rates. So hopefully this has drilled into your brain the idea that what you really need to focus on is 10-year treasuries when you're trying to anticipate where the rates are going to go. I hope the fact that we called this right helped some of you out there. I know a few of you went ahead and kind of followed my advice on what was going to happen with interest rates, and I hope that's worked out for you. I know I've got some buyers right now who literally just hit the market today who are pretty jazzed about the fact that interest rates have not gone up, and they're actually looking to do something here relatively quickly to take advantage of that. Freddie Mac's latest primary mortgage market survey said the 30-year mortgage interest rate below 4% again. Borrowers on Zillow were quoted interest rates well below that. According to Zillow's latest report, quote, on the interest rates borrowers are quoted on its mortgage marketplace, mortgage interest rates are actually lower than they were before the Federal Open Market Committee announced in December that it is increasing the federal funds rate for the first time since June of 2006. Zillow's report shows that the interest rate on 30-year fixed-rate mortgages fell in the week that ended Tuesday. According to Zillow's report, current rate borrowers are quoted on Zillow at 3.68, down 13 basis points from the week before. So that's great news. If you're looking to, let's see, they also, and just to give you the other numbers here, Zillow also reported the 15-year fixed mortgage rate was at 2.87, and a 5/1 adjustable rate mortgage was at 2.97. So that's great news, and that is cheap money. I mean, and remember, you're buying a product when you borrow money, and these rates are just ridiculous. That 3.68 rate is spectacular. It's actually below what I got on the property that I got in Hawaii. So. Next on the hit parade here is this rent to own story. I really wanted to share this with you because it's an interesting spin on this process. They asked the question, is rent to own the future of housing? A company called Home Partners of America's first securitization offers glimpse at new buying option. And what they're doing is putting themselves as sort of a middleman between sellers and buyers, where they will come in and they will purchase the home and then rent it to you, with the idea being that you're going to go into a rent to buy scenario with this company. Now, here's how they describe the program. Quote, under its right to purchase program, HPA, Home Partners of America, leases single-family properties to people who are looking to buy a property but have limited access to mortgage credit. The prospective homeowner chooses a property that he would like to eventually buy, and if the property fits HPA's criteria and the tenant qualifies, HPA buys the property and the tenant enters into a lease and right to purchase agreement that allows the tenant to buy the property at a predetermined price during the term of the lease, which is typically between 3 to 5 years. The purchase price typically increases by 3.5 to 5% per year throughout the term of the lease. Okay, so that's one way they're making their money. And as part of this agreement, they are building in appreciation for the purchase price of the home. Now, that's all well and good, but I'm going to argue that if this is something you want to try, and I strongly suggest folks do this, even if you have to make this offer to many dozens of sellers, or go onto Craigslist or go into any other social media and say, hey, I'm interested in doing this. Does anyone have a property they would like to rent to me with a lease option attached to it? I think you could find it. Now, it's a tough market. It's difficult to do, and I get that. And some sellers absolutely have to get all their cash out to buy that next property. But there are ways to absolutely navigate making this happen, whether it's going online and just looking for the homes that are for rent, or going to your real estate agent and saying, hey, can you get me a list of all the homes in this entire county or this area where I want to live, where the mailing address for the owner is different from the property address. Why would you want that list? Because that tells you that most likely, there will be some exceptions, but most likely that homeowner is renting it. They're landlording it out. So if you approach them and say, I would like to buy your house, can we come to a lease option agreement where over some period of years I'm paying you rent to live in the property, and be willing to do this even in homes that are currently rented? One thing is one side effect of this downturn is an awful lot of people who were never really in real estate, who were really just drawn to this will make me money because the real estate market's at a down point, got into it and didn't really anticipate the headaches involved with being a landlord and didn't prepare for them, didn't do a lot of the homework we've talked about that all landlords should do up front, and now find themselves with maybe something that is making them money, but maybe is more of a pain in the butt than they want to deal with. So you may strike a chord with some owners who like the idea of potentially, who are maybe already looking for an exit, who would like to see several years of the property continuing to make them money in terms of being able to rent it, but really want to have an exit strategy, would love to have someone there. And there's a variety of reasons why they would want to do this, not least among them being it pretty much gets rid of all maintenance concerns for them. Now, you can write this up so that and this is a carrot that you can use, where you'll be responsible for the upkeep of the property. If a toilet breaks, you'll fix it. If whatever happens, right? And the seller is comforted in knowing that if you do back out, A, the house is going to be better taken care of because you've been taking care of it based on the assumption that you were going to buy it. And B, they're not going to get phone calls at 2 o'clock in the morning saying that the toilet broke or whatever happened and things need to be fixed. So those are things that you can obviously do. You can continue obviously to leave it as a standard landlord renter relationship where they are still responsible for different levels of upkeep on the home. But you have to remember you're fighting an uphill battle in some cases because of the way the market's working, right? So you need to make this attractive to a seller, and how better to make it attractive than to sort of sit down and ponder the things that annoy a landlord the most. If they are managing it themselves, then you can probably pretty easily come up with all the things that annoy them about being a landlord and then make them non-issues for the period of the lease that you would have on the property. So the way you would do this, and this is great that they offer this and it's fantastic and it's a super sly way for them to facilitate this and then make money, because they'll absolutely make money on this. Um, but here's the thing, all the things where they're going to put padding in here in terms of the rent that they're going to charge you, in terms of the built-in percent increases per year throughout the term of the lease. These are all things that you're not going to do when you're dealing one-on-one with a seller who currently owns the property. You're going to approach it with an offer to them that makes sense, but you're going to lock in that purchase price at whatever you guys agree on today. So there's clearly a lot of folks are very optimistic about the real estate market. No way of knowing what it's going to look like in 5 years. Um, it may be an opportunity in the seller's eyes to at least guarantee a certain level of return. But what you're going to do is not only write it so that you're freezing the price at some point today. You're going to agree on a sales price today, and you're going to put that into the purchase agreement. Then you're going to have a lease option and any addendums that you might need. You can work with a realtor on this. Have someone who thinks creatively and can really walk you through this process and make it as attractive as possible. But you'll have this all written out. It'll be just like a normal offer. You're still going to use that residential purchase agreement, at least here in California, that's what we call it. And then you'll have an addendum, the lease option addendum. And it basically just says you have an option and a variety. You can put anything in there you want. Don't feel constrained by any of the boilerplate stuff. Make it attractive. Address those concerns of a potential seller, a landlord, so that you really are kind of enticing them along to think, well, this could be great. So you establish what price you want to pay. In addition, you set a rent, and I would set a reasonable rent. You don't want them to be making less than what they've been making. So whatever their rent is now, offer them the same. Of course, it needs to be something that you can afford. But here's the sweet part. You then in the contract say a certain percentage of the rent that you're paying them will be put towards the down payment on the property. So they're getting the money, they don't have to give it back. But with each rent check you're sending them, in for all intents and purposes, you're dropping the price of the house, right? If you are contributing to the down payment with each rental check you send, then that's bringing down what you have to pony up for the house, right? At the end of the 2 years or the 3 years or the 4 years or the 5 years, however long you set this up. So you write it with a certain percentage. Maybe it's 25%, maybe it's 50%. You could be aggressive to start and go back and forth, and just emphasize the fact that don't, if they reject it, make sure you emphasize this is a negotiation. This is our starting point. What would make you feel more comfortable with this? But you can really get creative and put whatever sort of clauses in there to sweeten the deal, and do some math. Figure out how much you would have as a down payment contributed given what you've written in the contract. If you are not going to have an adequate amount for a down payment when the time comes, because let's assume the house isn't going to appreciate. It depends on your market, and you need to understand where the trends are in your current market. Work with a realtor to figure that out, but try to figure out where you think the market in your area is going. And remember, there is a financial value to being able to purchase this way. So don't feel bad if you feel like you're actually purchasing at a time where in another couple of years or 3 years, or when this term comes up, the house will actually be worth a little bit less than what you've agreed on. Because remember, the service you're getting here, what you're achieving is actually, it has a financial value. But also keep this in mind. There really is no downside for you on this. Because if you work out this document correctly, if you make this agreement in a well-constructed, thought-out way, if you do get to the end of that 3-year, 4-year, 5-year time period that you will all agree on, and you've discovered that the home value has dropped through the floor, well, then you can back out of the deal. You do not have to exercise the option. That's why it's called an option. Option means you can either do it or you cannot do it, but it's entirely up to you. Do you want to exercise your option to purchase the property at the price agreed upon? Let's say you decide you don't want to. Well, then that means you don't get to use the money you've been contributing in rent towards a down payment. So the seller just keeps all that and can move on and try to sell the property to someone else, or they can try to rent it to someone else. But the best part is the power is in your hands. The rent to own, the rent, continue to rent, buy, or leave decision is yours. As long as that window of opportunity for the option is there, it's entirely up to you. And if it expires without you doing anything, well, then you're out of that contract, you're out of that option. And if you do decide you still want to buy the house, well, then you got to start all over again. You got to negotiate a new contract with the seller. But it's a great way to go. It's super ignored. It's not easy to do in a marketplace like mine, but I have to think that within the sound of my voice, there have to be hundreds of people in areas of the country where this is a very viable way to go. I think it could be a very lucrative way to get into a home where it also has a little bit of built-in discipline, right? One of the things we've talked about in terms of setting your goals is a discipline. Make things a habit. Do it. Schedule the time that you're going to dedicate to imagining what your goals are or working towards achieving them, right? Well, what's great about this is you can write this document in a way that the quote-unquote savings you need to do to dedicate towards a down payment becomes part of your rent check. It's invisible to you. It just happens. So now you don't need to be thinking to yourself, "Oh, I need to put this into the savings account each month to make the down payment." As long as you've coordinated what you know your monthly rent is going to be with what you need to have saved up at the end so that that amount will be in there for a 20% down payment or a 15% or a 10%, whatever you think is going to work for you, great. If not, if it's going to come up short, then you do need to have some discipline on your end, because you don't want to find yourself at the end of the option period and be in a position where you are unable to exercise your option because you haven't prepared adequately. So avoid that problem entirely by building in that preparation into the process. Make it an invisible thing for you, so that in addition to paying your rent, you're also saving money for your down payment. I think it's a great way to go. It's even, I think it's I am a big fan of it. I think it's cool. It's kind of creative. Not always going to be easy in certain marketplaces to find landlords, sellers who are willing to do this. But I think the payoff can be huge for you. Other things you may want to consider doing is building in a increase in monthly rent over the period of the term. The longer the term you're going to ask for, the more things like that a landlord's going to look for. It's also going to depend on whether or not this is a landlord who owns a bunch of different properties where their primary thing they do day in and day out is landlording, or if there's somebody who works for a living at something else and sort of just dabbled in real estate when they thought there was a good opportunity to do so back when things were down really low. That's going to be probably your ideal person. Someone who uh, thought it sounded like a great idea, got that one property, and then sort of moved on went on with their lives, just figuring that would be a good thing for them. But there's bound to be plenty of opportunities for you to do that, between you talking to a real estate agent and them talking with title companies, or if you want, you can go on the internet and get lists of folks in your area. You can buy mailing lists of folks where the mailing address is different from the property address, and then that'd be a great place to start if you want to do just a mass communicate with everyone sort of a thing to try and make these deals happen. But it's not ridiculously required. It's also just as easy to go onto the sites where landlords have rental properties advertised for rent, and you can contact them, and particularly find a home that you're interested in if you want to move into it, and let them know you'd also be interested in doing a lease option. Is that something that they'd consider? You may get 100 no's before you get someone even willing to entertain the idea, but the potential upside for you is so great, it's worth the time. It's worth doing. So consider it as another tool. It's just one more arrow for your quiver, for the wide, wonderful world of real estate. It could be a great way for you to get into your first home in a relatively painful way. Now, I hope that's been helpful for you. Of course, if you'd like to get in contact with me relating to anything you want to suggest, or any observations you'd like to make, or if you'd like to share with me some of the things that scare you the most about real estate, head on over to therebelbroker.com and click the Contact the Rebel Broker button in the upper right-hand corner, and you'll be able to share with me real estate experiences, biggest things that scare you about real estate, that type of thing. Or you can ask questions. Anything else you would like is fine. And of course, do take a minute to look at our sponsor. It's audible.com. If you go to audibletrial.com/rebel, you'll be able to take advantage of a 1 month free and one free book download, and it benefits the show and with no risk to you. So check that out. I'd appreciate it if you could take advantage of that and support the show a little bit. And of course, also in supporting the show, give us a thumbs up, happy face, stars, review, whatever tool you use to consume the show. Use whatever means they have to rate, review the show, because one of my big goals this year is to get out in front of more people, and only you can help me do it. Thanks again for listening, everybody, and I will talk to y'all next time.